The ocean world of Kareth had no land masses, only floating cities tethered to bulwarks that collected sky rain and kelp. Humans lived between gull and machine in hulls fashioned like wooden houses from old Earth, and they sang to the sea because the sea listened. Their engineers had invented singing buoys, small vessels that emitted harmonic pulses to calm migratory leviathans and call the plankton blooms to feed the farms. The buoys were simple, human-made devices with tubes and reeds and a stubborn love for low notes. Then the Voron came, a slender, whale-like intelligence that rode legends as if they were maps. They claimed the buoys were a violation. The harmonics disturbed old migration currents. The Voron offered an elegant acoustic weave they said would harmonize both species. They were patient, and their sound was beautiful. The humans accepted the weave to avoid conflict, replacing many buoys with Voron filaments that sang in perfect polyphony. At first, things improved. Leviathans slowed and curved away from kelp farms. Plankton pulses became steady. The Voron's patterns soothed old currents into new routes. Humans were grateful. Children learned to match the Voron melodies with their own voices. They called the new sound the weave, and it became a lullaby on boats. 5 years passed. The Voron's weave had a cost nobody expected. The human buoys had been simple instruments that allowed improvisation. Fisherfolk could tune them by ear when the current shifted. The Voron weave was beautiful but rigid. When a sudden thermal vent opened beneath the shallows, plankton shifted in a none-too-predicted pattern. The weave could not adapt quickly. Food webs wobbled like a top. The leviathans began to stray, and with them went the delicate balance that fed the floating farms. Mira, who raised kelp with her sister Juno, understood the weave technically more than anyone credited her for. She used to fix buoys, to twist reeds and carve notes with her pocket knife. Now the weave hummed with alien patience that refused to bend. The children ate less. Old songs lost certain notes. Farmers appealed to the Voron councils for help. The Voron sent emissaries who spoke in tones like old whale calls and promised a recalibration. But their counsels were far and their ways slow. Mira and Juno decided to act. The Voron prohibited tampering with the weave. They made it an offense to install human buoys that might disturb harmony. Mira had a plan born of stubbornness. Rebuild a single human buoy, a small thing that might teach the weave to bend. If the buoy could sing a note the Voron could not predict, maybe the weave would learn to flex. They built the buoy in secret, in the hull below the kelp racks where the children played. It was crude, painted with salt, and carved notches holding the reed. When they launched it at night, the buoy's voice cracked, a note that was not in the Voron catalog. At first, the sea wavered, currents hiccuped, a school of minnows scattered. Then, slowly, a leviathan turned its head and moved toward the sound. The plankton followed, attracted by the altered flow. For 1 week, harvests rose like bread in an oven. The villages celebrated. The buoy's note became a secret charm. The Voron discovered the buoy quickly. They came like a chorus of long shadows and demanded the buoy be surrendered. Mira and Juno argued that they had no choice. Children were hungry. The Voron insisted their weave must remain pure, untouched. The human council faltered. They wanted peace more than hunger, and diplomacy creaked into compliance. Mira refused to hand over the buoy. She said the sea was a shared thing, and the Voron's rigidity would starve her people. The Voron replied with a sorrowful tone that was almost pleading. The buoy's unpredictable note might spread and destabilize migration routes across regions, not just locally. They asked for a sacrifice to make the matter even. Mira could give the buoy, the Voron suggested, but the buoy must be burned in a ceremony where a human voice would sing the buoy's final note until it dissolved. This ritual, they promised, would ensure the buoy's song did not linger. Mira chose to burn the buoy herself rather than let a child's hand do it. On a cold dawn, the villagers gathered on planks. Mira held the wooden buoy against her chest. She sang the buoy's note, and the sound, crude, human, full of living memory, rang across the water and touched the faces of people and Voron alike. As the buoy burned, Mira felt something leave her, a tie to spontaneity, a right to improvise. The flames licked the carved notches and ate the reed. When the buoy was ash, the Voron were satisfied. They promised to send help and seeds for recovery. The crowd applauded, but applause rang thin. Harvests stayed stable after that, but something had shifted inside Mira and her people. The buoy's song was gone, and with it a small freedom to be unpredictable. Children learned the Voron weave without adding their own notes. Juno still tended the kelp, and sometimes, when no one watched, she would whistle a cracked version of the buoy's note and look out at the long blue, remembering. Mira found herself quieter, her hands cleaner, but her throat hollow where that song had lived. Years later, when a major migration crisis shifted across the region, the Voron weave failed again in a new place, and they came to Kareth asking for ways to adapt. Humans offered what they had: stories of the buoy and the ash, of one woman who had sung until her voice broke. The Voron met the story with interest. It was not a technical solution, but it held a social logic the weave had lacked. A handful of Voron researchers worked with human fisherfolk to design a hybrid instrument, a buoy that could be tuned by both parties and pattern that admitted small human errors as corrective inputs. The hybrid would be emplaced across several chains and would allow the weave to learn. The vessel bore both Voron filaments and human reeds. When they launched the first hybrid, in the presence of many witnesses, Mira was weak with age, but present. She touched the buoy and hummed a small note that did not have the raw confidence of youth. The hybrid pulsed, learned, and bent fractions of degrees it once wouldn't. The leviathans grazed in a wider arc that day. The sea took the new pattern, and for the first time, there was a small public recognition that two ways could be held together. Mira never claimed the victory. The buoy she had burned remained ash in a jar she kept beneath her bed. When she died, that ash was scattered into the sea, and small songs rose in the boats. The hybrid instruments were useful, but they also meant a formal compromise. The Voron still guided the large migrations, and humans kept a role they had to guard jealously. They had lost a rebellious note, and they had gained a steadier harvest. The loss mattered because the thing they had given up was not just an instrument, but permission to be wrong, to try. The gain mattered because hunger abated and children grew. At Mira's wake, a child whistled a cracked fragment of the buoy's note. The sound was imperfect, half memory and half invention. The Voron listened. Someone from the crowd, half in jest, added another off-key counterpoint. The two notes tangled like old friends. No one could say the world was the same as before, and no one could say it had been ruined. It had become something older and more complicated, a place where humans learned to sing with others and where sometimes they still dared to hum a strange note into the blue.